what does it mean for you if you go to the gym? Is pretty simple, is that the overall daily protein intake is much more important than the actual timing, right? If you
Okay.
can time your proteins maybe 6 hours later or 5 hours later when you have your meal, your main meal, it's fine. Don't worry about it too much. But it's more important that you get towards that 1.6 to even 2.0 grams of protein per kilogram body weight daily.
TeamBuildr is the online strength and conditioning software for performance coaches that allows you to create training programs and track progress over time for things like max back squat, jump height, or any other KPI that you collect. The free-form programming features allow you to brand and design your programs so athletes can complete them at their own pace or get extra rehab work in. The force plate and VBT integrations allow coaches to easily track KPIs that are critical for all sports. TeamBuildr Strength is currently offering a 30-day free trial when you sign up with the code EURO. Head to teambuildr.com and sign up with promo code EURO to access this exclusive offer. Hi, and welcome back to my podcast called Science in Sports. Today I'm joined by a passionate CrossFit athlete who also has a PhD in muscle biology and is an expert in the amino acid sensing and also the oxygen sensing. Please welcome Gommar. Hi, Gommar. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's never been that someone has introduced me as an athlete, but I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to be an athlete. Some on the higher level, some on the lower level, but
That's
I
true.
mean, we all do a lot of sports. So I think it was fitting for you. Gommar, nice to meet you. How are you
Yes.
doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Nice morning here in Switzerland. So I'm happy.
That's awesome. Gommar, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Maybe a little background, how you got into all the fitness in your scientific background?
Yes, of course. So I'm Gomar. I played golf actually at a very high level when I was a teenager and when I went into college in
Hmm.
Belgium. I went to university in Belgium and I thought, yeah, I'm quite good. I'm on national level, but not good enough to actually make it to the highest level. So I went and I studied sports sciences and exercise physiology in Leuven, Belgium. And there I went on, did a PhD where I looked at how muscle is affected, muscle mass is affected by high altitude and by nutrition and by other, let's say, external factors such as aging, exercise, and so on. And then, so that took me 5 years. This is now a good 10 years ago. And I got interested into other sports than golf because I'm actually quite, let's say, strong and explosive from like by genetics, by nature.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, golf is cool, but I don't have a lot of mobility and I actually don't hit the ball that much further than my peers who are actually much weaker than me in back squat, bench press, and so on. So a friend introduced me to CrossFit, and I started in one of the earliest gyms or boxes back then in Leuven. I just started CrossFit because it's fun and obviously it's completely different than also conventional exercise physiology. I mean, if you know a little bit about the background of CrossFit, it was actually against a lot of the science and the conventional science, exercise science that was out there, and just a different paradigm, which I thought was quite interesting for sure. And then yeah, I went on and I started my postdoc, which I'm still on. I'm now a senior scientist in ETH Zurich, one of the better universities in like technical universities in Europe, because I got like an invitation from my professor, who's my PI now, who was able to start like a whole new lab about exercise and health, and I was kind of also originating that lab with her, doing a lot of let's say molecular biology studies in mice, in humans a little bit, and in yeah, rodents and in cells. So that's kind of my let's say scientific background, my sports background, and then maybe
Hmm.
also important for this podcast, I started, let's say, 6 years ago together with my colleague and friend Henning Langer. I started a science communication platform called WODs. And why did we start this? Because I always thought that we did a lot of cool practical studies that we not only did ourselves, but also read obviously a lot, because back in the day, certainly 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of really good research. I still think really foundational for what we know now. And there was not a lot of communication about this, like people like you and me and coaches, CrossFit coaches, but also whatever athletics coaches, hockey coaches didn't really get access to that information. One, it was behind the paywall. It is behind the paywall. And second, when it is out there, you can still not really, I mean, it's sometimes really a difficult language to read and so on, right? There was no AI back then. So we started WOD Science to just to communicate this whole this whole knowledge, let's say, and this kind of took off. People are really interested in this stuff. We try to implement some of the findings to let's say High Rocks, CrossFit, but also other sports to say, okay, they found this. What can you do as an athlete with this, or as a coach with this? And yeah, it's still going. It's now a large part of my time that I push into this, doing YouTube videos, doing the content on Instagram, writing programs based on that science. So yeah, it's a hobby that turned into a business, and I'm hoping to expand this later on.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I texted you on Instagram. That's where we got in contact, because I saw one of your posts, found it pretty interesting. So I dug a little deeper into it. That's why we are connected now. So awesome. And thanks that you put out those amazing posts, and also on your YouTube for people to look into it. As a former ice hockey player myself, obviously I'm also pretty interested into the golfing aspect. I mean, I'll ask you afterwards a little bit about some tips for my driver. Still can't play that after 5 years. But for today's topic, or today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about, first of all, the amino acids, one of your subjects that you're very into. How do amino acids in general talk to your muscles? I mean, they're building blocks of protein. Yeah, muscles need them to grow and repair. Can you tell me a little bit on your expertise about the amino acid sensing, and why is it important for building muscles in general?
So what you're asking here is a bit of a black box, to be honest with you. So it's not exactly known, right? The molecular biology there is not fully fledged. It has been there has been a lot of or some molecular biology, let's say, details around this from cells, cancer cells, because obviously it's also very important in cancer, because that's obviously how those cells grow very fast. But in specifically muscle cells, there's less known. So a lot of that is, let's say, transferred from the cell world, right? So what happens is, it's very interesting that you have different let's say separate mechanisms to stimulate a very important target. It's called mechanistic target or mammalian target of rapamycin, right? It's called mTOR. Maybe you've heard about this. It's a big molecule that sits in every cell, certainly also in the muscle cell, and this is like the central governor of saying, okay, now you have to synthesize and translate more protein, or you have to stop it, right? Obviously, after exercise, after insulin, and after let's say eating, your cell is giving the signal, okay, now you have to synthesize more protein. And then when you do, for example, a long water fast, or you have been cycling for 3 hours without any food, then it's going to be the opposite thing. Like the mTOR says, okay, block protein synthesis. So that's very important to know. And as I said, let's say there's 3 different or independent pathways that can stimulate this mTOR pathway or mTOR pathway. One of that is growth factors, insulin, but also anabolic steroids, for example, right? So that's independently of, let's say, the other 2, which is amino acids that you just asked. So you need amino acids to get the building blocks to actually do the protein translation. And then you also have exercise, like mechanical contractions or mechanical load, that also via very complicated pathways can stimulate mTOR. So those 3 are independent and they work synergistically, meaning that if you do exercise and eat your whey protein shake, they're going to add up and stimulate mTOR to the maximal extent. And then you have maybe on the side, you also have insulin. As I said, it is not really it is also there, but we call this permissive, meaning that if you have cells or muscle cells and you don't have any insulin, zero insulin, which is possible in an in vitro or cell culture, and you give them amino acids or exercise stimulation, nothing happens. You need a little bit of insulin. But in a human body or in any body, there's always some insulin around, right? So that's why we call this rather permissive and not really the main driver of mTOR. Then otherwise diabetics would have massive muscles and so on, right? Because they have
Mm-hmm.
high insulin, let's say, signaling. So yeah, that's a bit the idea. And the amino acids per se are getting sensed by two. I mean, probably more, but two important molecules called LRS, leucyl tRNA synthetase, and cestrin-2. And those two are, let's say, molecules that can literally bind bind the leucine, the amino acids, and specifically
Mm-hmm.
leucine. We can get into that, and then signal towards mTOR. So that's the very basic superficial idea of mTOR specifically signaling.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned mTOR a lot.
Yeah.
To touch on that real quick. So when mTOR is activated, let's say, for example, or especially by leucine,
Yes.
let's say, it tells your body to build muscle.
Yeah. To build protein.
Can you?
To build protein. Yeah.
When we touch on the leucine part,
Yeah.
You can say it's one of the most powerful amino acids to signal muscle growth. And for me to how can I understand it? Why is leucine considered so powerful in the first place?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And again, it's a little bit of a black box, but we have some observational research showing that if you give all the 20 amino acids, you have obviously mTOR stimulation. If you take away of all those 20 amino acids in a cell culture, right, and you take out leucine, nothing happens or very little happens. And in my hands, actually nothing happens. Meaning that those two molecules, LRS and cestrin-2, they specifically bind leucine. No other proteins. There's amino acids. There are also other proteins that can bind other amino acids for sure. Again, it's a bit of a black box, but leucine seems to be the most important one to signal towards mTOR. So that's why back in the day, 15 years ago, the BCAAs, which are leucine, isoleucine, and valine, were really pushed by the supplement companies because they said if you have leucine, it's good. You just trigger the whole mTOR signaling and everything is good. But what we found afterwards, and that's also why we went quite hard against the only BCAAs supplementation with WOD science, is that the leucine is the trigger. You can literally call it a trigger. You need the leucine, otherwise nothing happens. But you also need, obviously, the other building blocks, such as the other 19 amino acids, or at least many of them, to build the wall, to build the whole protein, actin, myosin that are available in the muscle. All right. So that's exactly how you said it. You need leucine to trigger, but you also need the synergistic effect of the other amino acids. So that's why it's better to eat your chicken fillet or you're eating your whey protein shake than eating only the BCAAs, which would trigger mTOR only.
Yeah. You just mentioned at the end to intake like protein shakes or eat chicken.
Yeah.
For you also as a CrossFit enthusiast, athlete, however you want to call
it.
Enthusiast. Does it matter when I take my protein or amino acids?
Yeah, it's a good question because I actually did a study related to this, I think 4 years ago, where we did a pretty elegant experiment because I was always very skeptical about this protein timing effect. There was one study in aging older adults that's found that if you give the protein shake right after training, it's a bit better for overall muscle mass accretion. But I was like, yeah, it's an old people. They are really sensitive to amino acids or desensitized to amino acids. Maybe it's not the exact right study, and it's also only one study. So what I did in mice, I let them run on the wheel against resistance, right? Like for one night. And that's something that you can think of as like HIIT training. And this actually stimulates muscle growth in their calves, in their small muscles. So that's shown, and then we gave a protein shake, or actually only leucine. We triggered the protein accretion. We did this right after the run, so we let them run a whole night because they like to run, and then we stopped the wheel. We gave them high dose of amino acids of leucine, and then in another cohort we waited 48 hours and then gave them also the amino acids, the leucine. And there was basically no difference between two trials, meaning that if you give a very long time after the exercise stimulation your amino acids, there was still a higher increase in mTOR1 stimulation. And that's also what we see in humans, that the muscle protein synthesis is elevated to the same extent when you give the amino acids right after exercise, or even 24 hours. That's the longest I have seen after exercise. So what does it mean for you if you go to the gym? Is pretty simple, is that the overall daily protein intake is much more important than the actual timing, right? If you
Okay.
can time your proteins maybe 6 hours later or 5 hours later when you have your meal, your main meal, it's fine. Don't worry about it too much. But it's more important that you get towards that 1.6 to even 2.0 grams of protein per kilogram body weight daily. So that's simply because the sensing mechanism of this leucine is much longer. It's a longer time period than just 30 minutes or 1 hour.
Yeah.
That's biochemically for sure true.
I was asking before, you always read, and obviously me as a strength coach in hockey with my 25 players, you hear a lot of, I read that you have to take it an hour after practice, you have to take 1.4 times your body weight, and you always hear different kinds of theses. So I was curious on is it really that important if you take it right after in the evening?
It's
But
not
I
important.
always
The
said
overall is important.
yeah, I always told them to try to take at least like 1.8 times and try to really take it, or try to aim to take it at the same time each and every day consistently, like you just mentioned.
Yeah. Just eat normally like a human
Yeah.
being, 3 to 4 times per day. Sorry, and make sure that every meal has got some protein in it to get towards that 1.6 to 2.0, because
Yeah.
it's quite a lot, right? So it doesn't mean that a whey protein shake is useless, right? I mean, I'm not a big fan of all these shakes, but it can be useful for some athletes who are having different difficulties of getting a lot of protein in. Maybe
Yeah.
even certainly when they're vegetarian. Maybe it's just an easy option. I mean, I also have my protein bar that I eat at 10:30. It's just easy, right? It's just 20 grams of protein. It's quite tasty. So
Yeah.
convenience is the most important, but for the rest, I just eat normal food and I try to eat sufficient. And usually
Yeah,
it's
we
enough.
had that scenario that we played. We had played semifinals and finals last season in Tilburg, in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
and then in Hanover, and it both was like a let's say 8 to 10 hour bus drive. Last season we played against Krefeld, and we traveled there 4 times in 1.5 weeks. So it was a lot of traveling. So I think it was a um, good part that we had those shakes ready for them,
Yeah.
because we were just on the bus
Of
for
course.
a lot of hours. But I'm on the same page with you. If you eat healthy and if you eat 3 to 4 times, check your proteins. Yeah, like I said, eat healthy. Then I think it's achievable without, and a little snack next to work, a shake is totally fine and perfect. Yeah,
Yeah, there's really an over proteinization of food nowadays. Everything has
yeah,
extra protein. While people should think about, maybe that's also interesting, is you cannot talk about nutrition without taking into consideration physical activity. Meaning
yeah,
that what we know, for example, is I already said that the let's say the trigger or the threshold for leucine stimulation, right? Like stimulation of mTOR gets lowered dramatically when you do exercise. Meaning that
hmm
if you want to have a maximal phosphorylation, so maximal activation of mTOR, right? If you're sitting still, you probably need 30 grams, 25 grams of high quality protein. But if you do a hard session, whatever, CrossFit session, hockey session, something strength, and you eat maybe 15 grams of soy protein, which is lower quality, you likely will also have a near maximal stimulation of mTOR, because it's a synergy between this amino acid sensing and the sensing of the mechanical tension of the muscle. And again, it's a little
hmm
bit of black box, but we know that the threshold for leucine sensing is lowered with exercise. So yeah, that's why you actually see a pretty low effect, maybe if you think about it, a low effect of protein extra supplementation compared to the effect of exercise on muscle mass accretion. If you want to build muscle, make sure your training plan is dialed in, and the rest will follow if you eat somewhat high protein.
Yeah.
All right, that is
Yeah.
the most important. If you don't train certain muscles or you under train certain muscles, it's a much bigger effect than the amount of protein you eat. Of course, if you eat no protein, that's not good. But if you eat
Yeah.
normal food, that's going to be way inferior than your actual exercise. And that's something
Yeah.
also because of marketing and supplement companies push this a lot. People tend to forget this. Exercise first, the rest comes. The rest comes almost
Got it. Yeah.
automatically.
Yeah. For sure. Gommar, to switch topics real quick to one of the other expertise you were into. I told you before, oxygen sensing, the recovery aspect. Also with that, a question for you: how do athletes recover when they're training in oxygen limited conditions?
You mean at altitude?
For example, yes.
I mean, it will just delay. It will be delayed rather
Mm-hmm.
because I mean one of yeah. So I mean it's a hard question. So how do they recover? They will recover. It will be just delayed. But everything, um, uh, most of the metabolism in muscles needs oxygen, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
in cells needs oxygen. So when you have a harder time to get your oxygen saturation up, yeah, for example, in altitude, it will likely be delayed. I mean, there's not that much data on it, but what is known is that if you do, for example, hard exercise like cycling or even CrossFit or something at altitude, it will be just on the relative terms be more intense. So this inevitably
Mm-hmm.
will also affect your recovery because we know that exercise intensity has a strong correlation to how long you have to recover. Actually, I made a video about this 2 days ago. It will be published related to this. So that's why yeah, that's why that's important. If that kind of answers your question, yeah.
This podcast is presented by Like Me, your partner for social media and online marketing from Weiden, and Praxis im Salzhaus, your contact for physiotherapy and health in Altenstadt. What are your takes on training with masks, like high altitude masks, or
Yeah.
low oxygen training? Or
Uh,
there's one more thing I'm interested in. Maybe you can say something about that too. The blood flow restriction
yeah.
training.
Yeah,
How?
those are separate things. Like
Yeah.
that's an interesting question. So meaning, so I did my PhD related to altitude and altitude training, right? So it's quite some time ago. But what we found and what other people found is that training at altitude, right? Like you do your half-hour session or 45-minute session at altitude, that is not going to move the needle likely because it's such a short time domain that you're in altitude. I never really understood why you would do this as an athlete because the benefits are pretty minor, meaning that your intensity will be lower. And yes, you likely will have less oxygen for these 45 minutes, but what would be the training adaptations from this? Just pure first principle thinking. What
Mm-hmm.
is known, and what also all of the endurance athletes, certainly the cyclists, for example, do nowadays, is they sleep at altitude. They spend 16 hours at altitude and 8 hours they train in the mountains or even at lower altitudes to get the intensity in, to get all the oxygen needed for the exercise. So the the sleep high, train low. That's a paradigm that has been done for decades now and works really well because simply you boost your red blood cells, right? Like you will, the low oxygen environment will boost the accretion of red blood cells, and this will increase your oxygen transport capacity when you're back, let's say, at sea level and going for your Tour de France stage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, pretty well established, and I did also some work on this. Training with a mask is kind of the same as training at altitude. I don't see any benefit. I honestly think it's a bit of a gimmick. And certainly with a
Mm-hmm.
mask, you're just going to breathe in way more CO2. I don't know why people are doing this. It's rather an Instagram gimmick. than anything else. And training at altitude, that's also very hard because you need to go to some kind of instance where they have a room that you can have at altitude. For example, in our facility we have it, but I mean it's not easy
Yeah,
for everyone to do.
for sure. Yeah.
Then you have the last question, maybe the blood flow restriction. That's something kind of different because you have a local restriction of your venous return, meaning that the environment during the contractions of muscle contractions will be with much less oxygen. And then we know that if you do this, you can decrease the load or the weight on the bar or the weight on whatever your dumbbell to have the same effect. So really
Mm-hmm.
good, for example, for when you have an ACL reconstruction, or you had some kind of injury where you cannot lift the heavy loads. Then adding some blood flow restriction or some katsu training, that might actually be quite useful, I would think. Not the biggest expert here, but this seems to work simply because you can reduce the load on the dumbbell or the weight.
Yeah.
So also on the joint, obviously.
Yeah. Let's touch on the recovery aspect. You as a CrossFit enthusiast, after your workouts, what's your go-to recovery plan?
The most important recovery plan is your overall training plan. That's always what I say, meaning that
Mm-hmm.
if your training load is not well distributed, you can have the best recovery methods in the world, you will still overtrain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about how the training load, how hard you're training, how long you're training, how your body is recovering. That's number one, right? That's my key point that I'm always doing. If I do a super hard session, whatever 90 minutes, high intensity, whatever, a lot of strength, which you have with CrossFit, um, the next day I'm taking a rest day or I'm doing a zone 2 easy session. I
Mm-hmm.
never almost trained hard 2 times in a row. I think 95% of the people who are just doing CrossFit for fun or want to get a bit better should do that scheme. Only when you're an elite athlete and you can handle all that training volume, maybe you can do a bit more. But that's the key point about recovery. It's maybe a bit less fancy and it doesn't have all the gimmicks, because the gimmicks are really a cherry on top, or maybe the
Yeah.
1%, maybe. Obviously, you need to have. Maybe we can touch about that on that. You need some carbohydrates. Some carbohydrates right after training. We can talk about that. And you need to have sufficient sleep. But I mean, I don't have to tell you that on the podcast. That's clear that
Yeah.
recovery is affected by sleep. But also your training intensity is going to affect your sleep, right? So if you're always training too hard and you're really tired, it doesn't mean that you will sleep well. I mean, because your central nervous system is fried.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit the key point is thinking about your training and making sure you're undulating the training load within a week within your training plan.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Gommar, I have one more topic I want to touch on. I asked my viewers, I asked my friends, my teammates, to give me some questions regarding all those topics we just discussed. If it's okay for you, I would just give you some questions from my audience. Maybe we can touch onto some of those subjects. First one would be I'll just read it out to you. Is creatine useful for CrossFit?
Yeah, of course it's useful. It's one of the few things that is actually useful because it can enhance the amount of reps you can do. And if there's one thing that's important in CrossFit is your strength endurance. So how
Mm-hmm.
many reps you can do under fatigue. So I would say that if you have bigger creatine phosphate stores, which are enhanced by creatine supplementation, you will indeed improve your performance and also your overall strength. So yeah, together with caffeine, creatine is an absolute no-brainer for CrossFit athletes.
Follow up from my side. How much creatine would you take?
Yeah, 3 to 5 grams daily.
Mm-hmm.
That should be sufficient to load your body. Maybe a bit more if you're a vegetarian. Yeah, I think it's a very well studied and safe supplement that has been around for many years. It's kind of is revamped now because of a lot of the influencers and
Yeah,
also some studies on brain creatine that would increase your cognitive capacity, which is
cognitive
also
function.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I take it every night, 5 grams. it's completely safe, and it doesn't. I mean, it's not magic, right? It might. I mean,
Yeah.
because I eat meat. I eat sometimes red meat, not so much, and there is a lot of creatine already in meat. So does it really help me? I don't know, but it's safe, and it's pretty
Yeah.
cheap. So why not?
Yeah. Second one, I'll say it out first. DOMS, DOMS,
Yep.
delayed onset muscle soreness. Question is, if you have muscle pain, let's say 24 to 72 hours
Yeah.
after exercise, was it still a good workout?
Uh, yeah, DOMS is simply related to how used you are towards the movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing lunges at 100 kilos and you're never done, or you're only doing back squats, you will be sore, even though you're
Yeah.
super strong. But if you keep doing those lunges every 3 days for a month, you won't be sore for the same workout. So it's
Yeah.
not a great gauge of how good the workout was. It's just how accustomed you are to the workout, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
a lot of CrossFit people getting actually quite sore, because it's a constant variety of movements. And when the
Mm-hmm.
program is not well established, not really well programmed, you're actually always getting sore, 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 sore. So yeah, maybe it's a kind of a criticism also to CrossFit programming, is that you can be varied, but you have to watch out with the randomness, right? So that's
Yeah.
a bit how I see it. So it's yeah, that's a very well established thing. So yeah, I would say it could be a very good workout. It just your muscles were not fully, let's say, accustomed to that range of motion and that concentric eccentric contraction, and you get sore. It's fine. You again, that's also why you should watch out by doing 2 3 intense sessions after each other, because yeah, you will just aggravate soreness and
Yeah.
maybe muscle damage and so on.
Yeah. Next question: do you need to feel sore or pumped for muscle growth?
No, I think that's for sure not true. So it's again, it's just how used you are towards the movement. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, the muscle growth happens when you are just progressively overloading a certain movement. For example, I'm saying something leg extension. The first 2 sessions you are very sore, but then you just increase the weight slightly every week. You won't be that sore anymore, but still grow muscle, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe a common misconception that you always have to be sore for any muscle growth because you feel it. That's, I think, that's useful. That's useless information. It's rather again, how well is your training plan structured, and are you progressively overloading through time? And if you
Yeah.
have this objectively and also subjectively on paper, then you can think, okay, now I likely will grow muscle or get stronger, whatever your
Yeah.
goal would be.
If you have time, I
Of
got 3
course.
more questions. First of the last 3. Also, probably due to the Instagram hype going on in the last couple of years, is it more beneficial to use like biology based science workouts, or like the bro science, how you see it on the internet, the term?
Yeah. So you means the rather for lifting and getting stronger?
Yeah, in general, maybe also CrossFit related.
Yeah, I mean it's a very difficult and nuanced question, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that you need to make sure of, whether it's science based or bro science, I don't care, is that you're progressively overloading the body.
Yeah.
And I do think that science or data, I would rather call it data, not really science, can help you there. And it's a very difficult task in CrossFit. So if you talk about specifically CrossFit, to know that you're progressively overloading, and that's a big criticism of other people towards CrossFit, which I understand, to be honest, really, is
Mm-hmm.
that it's hard to know for a coach, for a trainer, for a CrossFit affiliate, if you're actually overloading the body. Because let's say you're doing uh, really varied compound movements. You do one day you do lunges, then you do back squats, then you do deadlift, and you just vary constantly. And you after that you always do a super hard workout, whatever, 21:59 of thrusters and burpees.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good training, but it's hard to overload that intensity, right? You're going already 100%. So
Yeah.
you can do more volume potentially, but it doesn't necessarily is better. You can do 24 21 18 of those reps maybe, but then the intensity is lower, so it's not so easy, right? We have we with our programming, we actually have a method to understand or to try to find out if the athlete is progressively overloading while still doing CrossFit workouts. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so that's I think you can call it science-based. I just call it data-driven. I think it's maybe a better idea. And then related to pure lifting, I also think, I mean, there is some truth in what the bro says, that you just have to go hard and go until failure. And if you do a little bit of cheating and you just use a little bit of momentum and whatever, you're probably gonna build muscle, right? Like
Yeah.
the muscle itself doesn't know. It only knows mechanical tension. I mean, I know there's quite some good research on lengthened parts also, where you do like eccentric contractions rather.
Yeah.
And Jeff Nippert has been big on this. But I mean, if you even watch his own videos and look at the studies, the differences are minute. I mean, for a normal person that is not a bodybuilder, I also sometimes think, man, just make sure that you progressively overload and just go hard in the gym, hard effort. You will gain muscle if you eat well and do everything well. Like,
Yeah.
but make sure that you maybe write down your weights, your reps, and see that you improve this over time.
Yeah.
I would say
Or
that's important.
track it.
Track it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Be consistent, track it.
Yeah. Just going into the gym every day without a plan, if that is the bro science lifting, that's not good. But I honestly don't think that's what they mean. It's rather just like like the specific range of motions and so on,
Exactly.
which I sometimes also think maybe it's a bit overthinking this stuff.
Mm. Yeah. Second to last, it's called WOD breakdown. WOD, obviously workout of the day in CrossFit terms. What's your favorite CrossFit WOD? And also, could you break it down, maybe also in easy terms, for the energy systems that are involved?
My favorite CrossFit workout is a 1RM deadlift. No, but if I'm talking about so my favorite is something that we programmed ourselves. We call this the WOD Science Powerhouse Test, and it's 2159 because it's very CrossFit style. I really like the idea of going high reps to lower reps because you can keep the intensity high of deadlifts at 90 kilos, so sub-maximal weight, pretty light, into bike erg cals. So lower body focused and just go hard. Takes you 4 minutes. From an energy system perspective, it's really glycolytic, and that's something that is very interesting in CrossFit, and there's a lot of physiology about this to talk about this. But CrossFit athletes, they have an unbelievably well established or developed glycolytic system, like anaerobic glycolysis. It's pretty hard to actually measure in like with science, in the lab. But what we know, for example, is that, or we have estimated that their VO2 max, so the maximal aerobic capacity, which is much easier to assess, is pretty moderate to, let's say moderate, not even high, moderate in very well established CrossFitters, right? But once they go when they have to go into these 4-minute, 5-minute time domains, which is a lot of those time domains, they are producing tremendous amounts of power. And that power is not only coming from aerobic sources, but also from anaerobic sources. It has to come, because otherwise it's just physiologically not possible. So that's why I really like such a test, because it taxes the glycolytic system, which is exactly what CrossFit athletes need. And it's just a cyclical movement, meaning that you should be able to do this almost unbroken. So really go hard, not resting too much, and not a lot of technique. And like sometimes also a criticism next to the varied aspect of CrossFit is that it's very technical, CrossFit. And sometimes that's what's holding people back. They can be really fit, cardiovascular, strong, but if you don't have the muscle ups, and if you don't have some of the technical movements, some people say that's good, that is CrossFit. But also some people could say, yeah, but you weed out a lot of people that are actually very fit but cannot just do the handstand walks, like, because they didn't practice it, right? And that's why I like this test, because it is just a pure test of physiological fitness. Let's keep it like that, and not technical fitness.
What's the time frame on that, you said?
Yeah, so
4
if you're
minutes?
fast, it's going to be 4 minutes. So like Fran, maybe you know Fran, 2159 of thrusters and pull-ups, very classic CrossFit. That would also be something that I really like, is something that is in the glycolytic system, not too technical, but really good test of CrossFit fitness.
Okay, gotcha. Last question, titled Science in 60 Seconds. could you, because we talked about importance of strength endurance in CrossFit,
Yeah.
break down this this term for in plain English for someone who never heard of it before?
Yeah, so strength endurance means that you can lift moderate loads for a long period of time. And that is different than pure strength, right? Like when we do strength training, rather, I always refer to how heavy you can lift one time or two times, like power lifter. That's going to be on the left side of the curve. It's going to be low velocity, right, of contraction, but
Mm-hmm.
very heavy. And then you
Yeah.
have something like plyometrics or sprinting also. It's going to be on the other side. It's pretty relatively lightweight contractions, but very fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something in between, I would say, is strength endurance. Is you are moving relatively fast, but also at a relative moderate weight, and that is exactly what CrossFit and also high rocks athletes actually need to be good at. So you see this also in elite athletes. Usually, the Instagram guys who can lift the heaviest, right? Like one arm snatch of 315, they usually don't win the CrossFit games. They might be high up and very well established CrossFitters, but
Mm-hmm.
usually those people are not the absolute best ones. The absolute best ones will be where the Gauss curve, the bell curve of strength, endurance, glycolytics, and so on is in the middle always, and they don't have super high strength, but also don't have big weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that's where strength endurance comes in.
That's a awesome explanation. Gommar, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thanks for the
I
questions.
learned a lot just from listening to you. And I think also my listeners will be very pleased with your Q&A answers. It's very,
That's great.
very good explanation. And I have to say thank you for your insights into the amino acid sensing, the obviously the muscle building process, oxygen recovery aspect, and also your take on or your talk about your daily CrossFit, how you implement things,
Yeah,
what's important, where to keep an eye on. So thank you very much.
pleasure.
I wish you all the best,
Thank
and
you. Same to you.
I hope we can stay in touch. I will put all the links to all your social media handles in the description below.
Thank you.
Also, maybe one or two studies from you, so people can really have more insights, more information about you and your work. So, thank you
Pleasure.
so much.
Thank you.
Take care and bye bye.
Bye bye, Neil.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating or comment, and share it with someone who loves sports science. And for more content, follow me on Instagram at science_in_sports_. See you in the next episode.